Сайн байцгаана уу хүн төзөгчтэй. Өнөөдөр манай де факто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Бүгд Найрамдах Куба Улсаас Монгол Улсад суугаа онц бөгөөд бүрэн ирэхэд Элчин сайд ноён Раúл Delgado Concepcion оролцож байна.
Раúл Delgado Concepcion Бүгд Найрамдах Куба Улсаас Монгол Улсад суугаа Элчин сайд. Раúл Delgado Concepcion Хосе Антонио Ичвария институтыг автоматын инженерчлэл мэргэжлэр төгссөн ба эдийн засгийн хамтын ажиллагаа болон гадаадын хөрөнгө оруулалтын магистрийн зэрэгтэй. Тэрээр Кубын мэдээлэл харилцаа холбооны яамны шуудан холбооны газарт мэргэжилтэн, гадаадын хөрөнгө оруулалт болон эдийн засгийн хамтын ажиллагааны яамны олон улсын эдийн засгийн байгууллагуудын газрын мэргэжилтэн, гадаад харилцааны яамд мэргэжилтэн, Исламын Бүгд Найрамдах Иран улс дахь Кубын элчин сайдын яамны 2 дугаар нарийн бичиг, Канадын Торонто хот дахь Кубын ерөнхий консулын газрын консул зэрэг албыг хашиж байсан.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Pleasure to have you on our program.
A pleasure to be here too.
And because also this year is a very important year in between two countries, diplomatic relations, one of the first country, I mean it's actually the first country from Latin America. It's 60th anniversary this year. It's a quite date, right? And so with that I would like to start a bit now about your current view on economic and political relations between two countries, at which level it is on and what we can do better.
Thank you, Yagal. First of all, let me appreciate and thanks for your invitation to your program. I think it's a quite revolutionary way of doing journalism in Mongolia, and appreciate all the efforts on your staff and yourself to bring truth and best realities of Mongolia to the people, and also for foreigners and other embassies and countries that they have been here in Mongolia. Yeah, you're right. First of all, Cuba was the first country in the region of America, not in Latin America. So we were the first in 1970 in whole America, December 7, 1960, to sign a diplomatic relation with Mongolia. And if you take into account that at that time the speed of the communications and the speed of the transport was quite very slow if you compare with now. But the most important that we can point around in this is that was the willing of the two governments at that time to establish a diplomatic relation, despite we have 16,000 kilometers away and more than 12 hours of difference between the two countries. Our history and our let's say length on evolution of the countries are completely different. But it's amazing when you studied Cuba and when you studied Mongolia. We have many things in common, and we have many points that we can consider the same. I mean, in the heritage, in the way of the people behave, and in the culture itself. Despite our huge difference in history, Cuba is a very, let's say, young nation. If you compare with Mongolia. Our history begins, let's say, in 1492 when Christopher Columbus discovered America, especially because the first step he put it in America was in Cuba too. It's a coincidence, but October 12, 1492. But from there until now, our nation has become one of the most important in the world. Not only in the political arena, but also in economical, in sport, cultures, and many other things. Mongolia has a huge history, centuries of histories of people living in this, let's say, very peculiar territory of the world, And for Cuba, it's a great honor. It was a great honor to sign a diplomatic relation with Mongolia at that moment. 60 years, you say very fast, but it's a long time, and has been a history of friendship, support, and really understanding between the two countries. I'm very proud to be here in Mongolia right now, in this moment, when we can achieve this long period of friendship between the two nations.
This anniversary is not only between states, a lot to do with between peoples in particular.
You're right.
I think several hundred Mongolian students were trained in Cuba with the help of your government for years, as I remember, it last maybe at least 40 years or so. And we have a small Cuba here of the community of students, ex-students now. Everybody is working in a particular field of medicine, playing an important role, your graduates, right? Graduates. And so what is, this is in between people. And also in between states, we had, I think, Сэдэв visited Cuba, Бүгd 2016 visited Cuba. And I understand your president and your foreign minister have invitation to visit Mongolia. Is it going to happen soon, or?
Yes, let's say that we have been prepared with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia and a plan to celebrate this anniversary. Unfortunately, this thing of coronavirus around the world and the pandemic have been put both countries in the difficult situations to try to achieve the best result of this and to avoid people get sick and many other things. This struggle is not only Cuba and Mongolia, it's a worldwide struggle against the pandemic. We has a long history of let's say, visiting, of the high-level visitings between Cuba and Mongolia. Сэдэв was in Cuba 2 times in 1976, and I remember 1978 after that. But also Raúl Castro was visiting Mongolia in May 1970. After that, many other Minister of Foreign Affairs, let's say...
At that time he was a Minister of Foreign Affairs?
No, Raúl Castro at that time was Minister of Defense.
Which is currently the President?
No, our President, it's Miguel Díaz-Canel, and almost 2 years ago. And we have been have this contact together between the two nations from long time. After that, many other Minister of Foreign Affairs and parliamentarian members of the Parliament of Mongolia has been visiting Cuba, and also President Alberto, as you said, visited Cuba in 2016. The Mongolian authorities, as you well said, has been invited Cuban President and Minister of Foreign Affairs to visit Mongolia during this year, particularly in the 60th anniversary. And we hope that this situation, we can pass this situation of coronavirus soon, and we can initiate again our celebration with Mongolia. Particularly this year, Cuba celebrate anniversary with other 14 countries in Asia. Sorry, 10 countries in Asia. So we has been planning, visited all of them. We just hope we can recover from this pandemic situation very soon.
About those Mongolians studied there? Yeah. How often you meet this community?
Yeah, let me say something about that. We are very proud of this cooperation with Mongolia. As you say, more than 170 students has been graduated in Cuba from the moment that we start this cooperation. And let's say that one thing that it's particularly important, Jargal, in this is that Cuba has been doing this with more than 176 countries around the world. Right now, more than 19,000 students, foreign students, in Cuba for free. The scholarships that Cuba offer or give it to our friends countries around the world has the only purpose of the prepare people and be a person of wealth and to help countries when they return from their studies in Cuba. Particularly the Mongolian students in Cuba, we are very proud of them. They have been very good students and they have been graduated with the high grades in Cuba, and they are part of our people. The time that they have been studying there in Cuba. Right now we have 19 students in Cuba from Mongolia. They most of them study medicine. And why medicine? Medicine it's one of the policies that Cuba have been implementing around the world. World needs medicine. World needs doctors. World needs wealth and health. And bring those students back to Mongolia to be a doctors. It's a succeed if we can accomplish that. So this we are often have a contact with that community. They have an association, Jargal. They call Graduate Association, Mongolian Graduate Association in Cuba, and they are very active in the way that helping society with many other activities. Despite they have their own works and they have their own responsibilities. But they are quite good kids and good people.
We both countries were close allied to the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union was kind of supplying at least oil to Mongolia, to Cuba, and a lot of economic subsidies because it was a bigger country, etc. Then that system is collapsed, 90s. And we had not one political party as before, and then all these things happened like in all Eastern Europe, etc. But yet in Cuba, that system is staying. One party is ruling, and etc. And now being yourself, you're a young person, and I was in your country at the end of 80s, had a great chance to shake hand with a great leader. Fidel Castro, and that time I also met our students. We were staying in this Nacional Hotel, and beautiful country, and great people. And that's why after 90s, what's happening all around was, of course, of my attention. And then Cuba was staying, and it's keep going with one political party system. How do you see from that perspective what's going on in your country?
Jargal, we have to understand the history of Cuba. What was Cuba before and what we are right now. For 1959, we were a very poor country, 4 million people, starving, 90% of the population illiteracy, and 13 families in Cuba own the 99% of the land. And
13, 13 or 30 families.
13.
Okay, only 13 families own 99% of the wealth. Okay.
Exactly. No, not only the wealth, but also the land. The land. And I'm talking about, I can mention few of those families, but for you it's going to be quite, let's say, known, because those families are well known right now all over the world. It's a big corporations around the world, and especially corporations from the United States. So what happened?
Can you name some of them now?
Yeah, of course, Exxon, Mobil, all of them.
Well, you had no oil, but why Exxon would be there?
Because they were selling oil in Cuba, and they were United Fruit Company, for example, many other companies that they deal with the sugar cane at that time in Cuba, etc. So what happened after our long battle against Spain colonialism in Cuba during more than 1 century in 19th century is that when the Cubans were able to have their own independence, United States took from us that independence in 19th. So in 1900. So
1900.
and, yeah, 1900. And then what happened is that they imposed on a constitution at that time were allowed them to intervene in Cuba whenever they want. And it was quite very difficult for Cuban because every time let's say U.S. ambassador wanted, they would able to change the president in Cuba. And from that moment until 1959, more than 20,000 young people lost their life in Cuba on the dictatorship of some of the most known president at that time in Cuba, Machado and Batista, especially Batista. He took the power in 1952 for the second time. And he killed more than 20,000
How
young
long
people.
he was in power?
Oh, it was the second time because he was president before, and then he made a coup
More than
of the
10
attack,
years.
and then he took the power again. So, but same this, Jargali, I'm just put you in perspective that we were 4 million people starving in Cuba with the beautiful natural resources, and 90% of the people were illiteracy. Birth per 1,000 child was more than 168 mortality rate. So revolution changed all of that. Revolution changed the mind of the people too, because give to the people the real power of our country. Gave the land to the people. The first things that the revolution did was the land reform, and they give back the land to the peasants and to the people that cultivate and the people who grow the land. And the second was an illiteracy campaign, which we did in 1961, just 1 year after the revolution triumph. So by 1962, all the Cuban people knew how to write and read. And from there until now, we have been achieved a lot of things. But in terms of what real human rights means for the people. So health, education, sport, and culture. Those things in Cuba are universal, free, and right for people. So when you ask me, and we have to see this in the context of the cruel and genocide blockade against United States, against Cuba, from that moment until now. Jargal, even now, during this pandemic, United States have been stopping the ships to bring masks and medicine to the Cuban people. They have been interfere our trades and our buying of medicine for the people in Cuba, even in this situation. So you can analyze, you can see how cruel is this policy against the Cuban people, just because we decided to go independence, just because we decided what to do with our people. And I'm telling you, because the people in Cuba, they don't have any hate against America. We have more than 1.2 million Cubans living in the United States. We have excellent relation with the American people. What we will never stand and we will never knees on the government of the United States. And for that, we have been paid an a cruel cost, because one of the, let's say, just a few days ago, 3 days ago, let me tell you, Mallory, who was a Secretary of the State at that time, he wrote a memorandum, which is the essence of the blockade against Cuba. Is make the people suffering economically and hunger, starving by hunger, and from that, with that means, make the government to get down. Make the people disanimate against a Cuban revolution and to get and change the government in Cuba. So this is the essence of the blockade, and it's a stealing force. It's cruel. It's make us very, very difficult for anything, especially to grow our economy.
Because it's closest and largest market, and this is natural way of trading.
Exactly, and not only because of that, Jargal, but also because we are natural neighbors, but this blockade has also extraterritorial laws that they impose unjust, unfair to the other countries when they try to do business with Cuba. They avoid. I mean, they try to stop those business with the many other countries around the world, and they are doing financially, economically, and commercially. So this is the reality. That's why in the last 28 UN voting resolution in the General Assembly, Cuba has been winning unanimously, almost, only with the United States and Israel against that resolution. And that resolution, what says is that they have to stop that blockade against the Cuban people.
Look at, you know...
And no, to back to the beginning of your question, and when you understand our history, sorry, Jagat.
Yeah, all right.
When you check the history and the facts that I already told you, you can only understand why the people in Cuba have been supporting the one party. One party means in Cuba, and it's something that has been misunderstanding or mischanging by the medias and all that propaganda that they try to demonize Cuba as an example. One party means in Cuba unity. One party means in Cuba sovereignty. One party means in Cuba will of the people. I mean, our people have been supporting the Communist Party of Cuba because of what they have been done for the people and what they are doing every day for the people. And it's the way and it's the decision of our people, our whole country
now
that have one party as a way of ruling. And we are respecting others' ways of rulings around the world.
You said unity. If a part of a country, other people decide to go ahead, make their own political party, and compete with the Communist Party, then what's wrong with that? If it is the case,
we don't. I mean, this is in the Constitution. We has been passing 3 times right now. Constitution in the country.
1900.
Sign it, stamp it, and approve it by more than 95%, the last one, 95% of the population. And in that constitution, the people decided that the only way and the only party that have been ruling the country is the Communist Party. So we don't have nothing against the people that they have other way to thinking, but the people in Cuba has decided that this is the way that we are doing.
The similar situation now is happening with Venezuela. As you and me were talking before, and thank you very much for reading my newspaper as well. And we have once talked about situation with in Venezuela, where number one richest country of oil reserve today is now people are starving, and situation is very not very good for the people. And is it kind of special relations between two countries?
Yes, and let me clarify something, Jagal, for your audience. I mean, Venezuela has a different history from Cuba. Venezuela is the first reserve of oil in the world.
Largest,
And Venezuela, as what happened in Cuba, they has also very few families that they own the 90% of the resources in Venezuela, especially the oil. What the government of Venezuela, and when this revolution started in Venezuela by Chavez, is the will of the people to put these resources in the hand of the people. And what happened right now is that the situation is not that bad as the media says. The situation is that the media is trying to demonize everything that the government of Venezuela doing by their people. But if you take into account what they have been doing for their people from the moment that they started, Jargal, I can tell you that Maduro's government has the whole support, not only because I'm saying, because the people vote for them, because the people support from them, because the army, and you cannot change that by saying no. I mean, nobody. I'm not talking about you. About talking about the media and the people in the United States that they want to take in their hand their resources. Jargal, the State Department, Pompeo has been saying that without any shame. We have to control the oil of Venezuela. What is that? What we live in now? When Secretary of the State of the United States said that we need to control the Venezuelan oil, what's that? What world we live in now? So you have to understand that it's not that like that they said. Venezuela is suffering right now and a huge blockade against their people, because they are not blockade the government of Venezuela. What the United States is doing right now is trying to blockade the food, the medicines, and they put to starving people in Venezuela to what? To do the same that they have been trying to do with Cuba 60 years ago. But they will not achieve. One simple reason, Jargal, is that they don't understand our people in Latin America. We have been colonials for more than 600 years, and the people already wake up and they say, okay, that's enough. You know what? This is our land, this is our resources, and this is our people, and we have to take care of them. I'm not talking about systems. I'm not talking about communists or socialists or whatever you want to call. I'm talking about the distribution of the resources should be more equal, more accessible for everybody. How can people like in Venezuela with this amount of oil and this amount of resources, only few of them, few families, I don't know how many, but it's very few, they control the whole resources in Venezuela, and then millions, 35 million people in Venezuela are starving and living in the poor conditions. Okay. So this is the situation. Very important. And what I want to point it out.
Well, that's I wanted to hear your opinion on the situation. I'm glad we have talked, and since the time is short, my final question would be about economic relations between two countries. Cuba, Mongolia knows, we talk 3-4 generations already knowing each other, right? What kind of trades we can do? Please tell us.
We, Jagal, in the past years, as you mentioned, in at the beginning of the 80s or something like that, we had let's say big trade between the two countries. Cuba used to send to Mongolia alcohol and sugar cane. That was at that time the main product. Main production that we had, and Mongolia sent it to Cuba leather, a few other things related with the livestock like meat or things like that. And we had at that time, let's say, reasonable amount of trade between the two countries in the very fair way and in the very reasonable price for both countries. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and the depression in the both countries, that almost stopped immediately. I mean, it was right now we have a cooperation on the biopharmaceutical industry. We are selling to Mongolia products that the pharmacy needs here, and especially for treatment of the very, let's say, diseases that they are more affecting the Mongolian population, as diabetes, cancer, hepatitis. And we have been, in the last 40 years, we have been developing a huge industry on biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry. And this is one of our let's say, path to cooperate with Mongolia. The other, and as you know, we can do many things, and we are doing some of them in the area of culture, in the area of sports, for example. Cuba has also experience in some of the very popular sports here in Mongolia, as wrestling, judo, and we can cooperate. We did in the past with a few trainers here in Mongolia. So we are trying to see what it's more comfortable for in the other way, let's say. Okay, in the other way, Mongolia has a huge experience in the mining industry. Unfortunately, we don't have this amount of let's say, minerals in Cuba. We have nickel, some copper, but Mongolia have been achieved and quite experienced in the mining industry, and we are trying to see how can we also transfer that knowledge to the Cuban side.
So is it possible for Mongolians to come make exploration and develop and etc. and make investment?
We are open, and we have been delivered to the Ministry of Mining and the investment opportunities in Cuba in the mining industry. Yargal, that is one thing that is very important in the commerce, is the distance.
Yes.
And because of we are so distant, anything that you are doing with Cuba, it's a very long.
Understand. Nevertheless, people are working, and
exactly.
You are here. We have a lady ambassador in Cuba. I hope you guys are working together, meeting together.
We are working together. She presented credentials the last 13th of February, and she already started to have a meeting with the Cuban authorities, and she is very happy, and Cuban authority has welcomed her very well. She's very active ambassador, and we met, of course, before.
And as well as you are here, and I'm happy that we keep going with the friendship.
Thank you very much,
because it's so many 60th anniversary. 60 years is for Mongolia, we call it jarang. So every 60 years things change, bigger way, within one circle. That's why when I saw it, and I'm very delighted to have you on my show and sharing your thoughts. And I think it's also information for many people to understand what is it exactly, because you listen before you make any decisions, you make two sides listening. So that's what I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The relation, as you said, is they're going to change, because now we achieved the 60th anniversary, and they're going to be more united. They're going to be
new
better.
Level.
They're going to be more comprehensive, and we are going to give to the Mongolian people and your audience all our best. And we decided not only to your audience, but also to the whole Mongolian nation, the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The same to you, to your people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Та хүн түлхэгчтэй өнөөдөр манай de facto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Бүгд Найрамдах Куба улсын Элчин сайд ноён Raúl Delgado Concepcion оролцлоо. Их баярлалаа.